Your heart just stopped. 1 second it was beating, and now it isn't. That fast. That simple. This is second zero. And what happens over the next 60 seconds is something science is only beginning to understand. Because the moment you die might not be the moment your brain goes quiet. It might be the moment it becomes strangely, terrifyingly active. Let's start at the beginning. The first thing that happens when your heart stops is nothing. At least nothing you can feel. Your blood pressure drops to zero. The roughly 5 liters of blood moving through your body just a moment ago are now almost completely still. No pump, no circulation, no delivery. But here's the strange part. Your brain doesn't know yet. For the first few seconds, your neurons are still using the oxygen already inside your blood. Your thoughts are still happening. The last thing you were looking at is still being processed. For a brief moment, you are still completely you. But that window is closing. Around 10 seconds in, your brain begins to notice that the deliveries have stopped, and the brain is extremely demanding. It uses roughly 20% of the body's oxygen despite making up only a small fraction of your total body weight. The cerebral cortex, the part involved in conscious thought and awareness, begins to shut down. This is usually when consciousness disappears. Your eyes stop properly processing the world. Sound fades. From the outside, you look gone. But inside the brain, something much stranger may be happening. In 2023, neuroscientist Jimo Borjigian and her team at the University of Michigan were monitoring the brain activity of 4 comatose patients as life support was withdrawn. They expected the brain to slowly fade, like a machine losing power. Less activity, then less, then nothing. But in 2 of the 4 patients, that is not what happened. Within seconds of the heart stopping, the brain suddenly surged. A powerful burst of gamma wave activity spread across the brain. Gamma waves are associated with some of the brain's most complex activity: awareness, memory processing, conscious perception, even certain forms of dreaming. And the activity didn't look like random electrical noise. It appeared organized, concentrated in a region of the brain linked in previous research to visual processing and experiences of being outside one's own body. Borjigian described the intensity of the surge as, quote, crazy high. Now this is where the science becomes uncomfortable, because for decades, people who were brought back from cardiac arrest have described experiences that sound strangely similar to what this kind of brain activity might produce. A bright light, a feeling of moving somewhere, a sense of watching the body from above, and sometimes a life review. You've probably heard the phrase, your life flashes before your eyes. Most people imagine a greatest hits collection, your graduation, your wedding, the birth of your child. But many people who report these experiences describe something completely different. The memories are often ordinary: a hallway, a smell, a conversation they had forgotten, a moment from childhood that seemed completely meaningless. One person described remembering the sound of a ceiling fan in a room from their childhood. Another remembered standing beside a window during a storm. Nothing dramatic, nothing important. And that's what makes the idea so strange, because it raises a question neuroscience still cannot answer. Are our forgotten memories actually gone? Or are they still somewhere inside the brain, hidden behind the memories we can consciously access? We don't know. And to be clear, science has not proven that the dying brain unlocks an entire hidden archive, but the brainwave data suggests something far more complicated than a simple switch being turned off. Now let's go back to the body, because while the brain may be surging, the rest of you is beginning to go dark. Around 30 seconds after the heart stops, oxygen is no longer being delivered to your cells. Your body's roughly 37 trillion cells begin to notice. They switch away from their normal oxygen dependent energy system and start using a backup process. It can produce energy, but there's a problem. It also produces lactic acid, and that acid begins accumulating. Your muscles are no longer receiving normal instructions from the brain. They relax. Your jaw falls open. Your eyelids stop holding themselves shut. If you were standing, you have already fallen. Your pupils become fixed. The muscles that normally adjust them to light are no longer functioning properly. Your eyes are still physically there, but the system interpreting the world through them is disappearing. Or is it? Dr. Sam Parnia, a resuscitation researcher at NYU, has spent decades studying consciousness during cardiac arrest. His AWARE studies have examined hundreds of cardiac arrest patients across multiple hospitals, and the results are difficult to simply ignore. In the AWARE-2 study, published in 2023, a significant number of cardiac arrest survivors reported some form of conscious experience during the period when their hearts had stopped. Some described what researchers call a recalled experience of death, structured thoughts, clear memories, a sense of awareness, and a smaller group reported experiences involving both visual and auditory perception. They said they could see, they could hear, while from the outside, their hearts were not beating. And here's another pattern that keeps appearing. Many people who come back describe the feeling that they were not alone. Sometimes it's a parent, sometimes a grandparent, sometimes someone they knew who had already died. They describe a presence waiting for them, a presence telling them they had to go back. Science has not settled what these experiences mean. They could be the brain constructing a final, deeply comforting experience. They could involve mechanisms we don't understand yet. But there's one thing the reports do seem to have in common. For many people, dying is not described as terrifying. It is described as peaceful, quiet, sometimes even beautiful. Now let's return to the body. At around 60 seconds, the damage to your cells is becoming serious, but it is not necessarily permanent yet, and that distinction is everything, because this is still a window where resuscitation can work. If CPR begins, if blood flow is restored, if a defibrillator is used when appropriate, there is still a chance to reverse what has happened. Brain cells can survive without oxygen for several minutes before permanent damage becomes increasingly likely. So at the 1 minute mark, you are in a strange biological limbo. Not alive in the traditional sense, but not necessarily beyond recovery either. Your body temperature has barely changed. Your skin is only beginning to pale. Inside your cells, the damage is just starting. Cell membranes are weakening. Enzymes that were safely contained begin leaking out. And a process called autolysis is beginning. Self-digestion. Your own cells slowly starting to break themselves apart. But at 1 minute, most of your body is still structurally intact, still waiting. And waiting for what? There are two answers. The medical answer is oxygen. Restore blood flow quickly enough, and many cells can recover. People do come back from cardiac arrest every day, but the other answer is harder. Because if nobody comes, if there is no CPR, no defibrillator, no intervention, then this may have been your last minute of existence. And based on everything we are beginning to learn, your brain may not have spent that final minute quietly shutting down. It may have surged. It may have become unusually active. It may have searched through memories you haven't thought about in decades. And maybe that's why the people who come back rarely talk about money, or status, or the things they spent years trying to prove. They talk about time, about people, about moments they were too distracted to appreciate while they were happening. Because maybe the strange truth is this: the memories that matter most to us at the end may not be the moments we spent our entire lives chasing. Maybe it's the late night conversation in the kitchen, The sound of rain against the window. The ordinary afternoon you thought was completely forgettable. The moment you were alive and didn't realize how important that was. Every second you have is a second someone else already lost. And if the brain really does begin to light up in its final moments, then maybe your last minute isn't a summary of your achievements. Maybe it's a reminder that your brain was recording far more of your life than you ever noticed. And in the end, it might be the ordinary moments, the ones you thought meant nothing, that come back first.